Well, it's nice seeing you all here today. And what this next talk is going to be about, um, just to let you know, I'm a pediatrician. I started making games in middle school in 1982 on a TRS-80 because the computer center had a rule that you can't play games unless you write it. So we did. And I went on to write games, but later to write medical simulations and training products. And through working in a government role, I ended up funding a bunch of games and then being a program manager for a bunch of games in the health space. And then I've done some of my own research and kind of gone into those things. So I've seen a lot of interesting things throughout the years. I've seen some exciting things, and I've seen some really awful things. And I thought it would be fun to explore the qualities that make some of these experiences useful and others less so. So I'd like to start talking a little bit about games and what we know about games. Games are engaging and enjoyable experiences. Games can be motivating for players, and they have repeat play value, at least the successful ones. Games can be purposed for education and health. Games permit experiential learning. In fact, games encourage us to learn about our experiences, ourselves, and others. Games can motivate behavioral change. Games can change your life. They can improve your health habits and your mental health. Gosh darn it, reality is broken. I say games can change the way we live our lives every day. Maybe they can prevent the rise of the ocean and save us from ISIS. You know what? Maybe we can just upload and not worry about anything and be a neuromancer or something. You know, save me, Nintendo, transform me. Okay. So there might be a little hyperbole. I'll say, so about how high of a number do you go up to as far as agreeing with this progressive list of statements? Just to kind of get a number in your head here. How many tens? Raise your hand if you're a 10. 9, 8, 7. And if you keep your hand up if you're like 7 or higher. 6, 5, 4. Okay, we got most of the room now. This is kind of what I think. I think I have 2 of these kind of backwards. I think 1 through 5 is pretty easy. I think we've gotten there. I think 6 and 7 are possible, but they're really hard. And it requires really doing something well in order to pull that off. And I think the other ones above that, I'm not so sure. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about games. We're going to talk about people, and being a doc, I call them patients. We'll show a little bit about some games that I consider to be successful health games, and talk about common traits of some of those good games. And then we'll talk about health game failures, which is even more fun because we can learn more from them sometimes than we can from the successful ones. And then whatever we'll do at the end. So let's talk a little bit about games. Why do people play games? You can boil it down to achievement, stimulation, and socialization are 3 broad categories of reasons that people like to play games. So if we want to put labels on people who want to do these things, we can do that. And so we have people who tend to be achievers, who want to play for achievement, explorers, who maybe might enjoy that stimulation, and then socializers. And we have 2 types of socializers. We have socializers who want to connect with other people and enjoy social things. My wife kind of like does that. And then we have dominators who really like to, show what they can do compared to other people. But those are important motivations to play games. And what's important to know about that is that these are the hooks are part of the hooks that we use to engage people in our games and keep them playing our games. And all the successful game companies know this, and this is a purposeful part of their design. I would like to run through a few quick games just to kind of go through them. Some of the games I like, maybe some I don't. So Zork, okay, a text-based strategy game. I think this is clearly in the exploration field, maybe a little bit of achievement. You're standing in an open field west of the White House with a boarded front door. There's a small mailbox there. You create an entire world through a text narrative. Awesome, a great experience, very immersive in its own way. Now later on they added graphics and that kind of went downhill. It actually did not enhance the game. It actually probably was a detriment to the game. Here's another type of game. Anybody, I'm sure you all know this is Asteroids. This is an arcade game. So it's physics, mechanics, right? Who's going to play this game? It's a big achievement thing, sometimes a competitive thing. I remember being at the diner, and there would be one of these machines by the men's room, in between the men's and women's room, and there'd be a line of quarters up, you know, while you're waiting for your food, and seeing who was the hottest person playing Asteroids. That was a big deal. Similar pattern game like Pac-Man, right? Very similar type of motivation. You're following patterns, trying not to get caught, trying to score. Here's another game where you're avoiding obstacles, Frogger. I think that would fall in a similar category, and even though this is an old game, we're still playing it today, right? Now we call it Crossy Road. Now something here changes a little. This is Gauntlet, and Gauntlet 2, besides being one of the earliest games to have speech synthesis in it, you can have up to 4 players in an arcade game. And besides collecting up to 4 quarters, it has people playing together cooperatively. And that introduced a new fun dimension to games. Here's another type of game. Anybody recognize the game in the upper left? Oh, dude, you got it. You're the first one. Yeah, so there's a whole genre around the Pacific Rim of these dating simulations that we really don't have in this country, and they are completely weird. As a matter of fact, there's one where like you try to date a praying mantis and other insect-type people. I mean, Japanese are amazing people, but a little strange sometimes to understand. But yeah, these have motivations that are actually single-player experiences, but these are kind of achievement games. You're trying to achieve dating the Bishonen over there and having the best boyfriend, right? Okay, here's another type of game. This is one of my wife's favorite, Words with Friends. It's the ripoff of Scrabble online, but it's probably more successful now. This is a competitive social game. And what I like about it is it's asynchronous. My wife plays this one too. I don't understand it. Why do you think people play that? I guess stimulation? I don't know. I don't get it, but it's kind of entrancing. Maybe that's part of that, you know, inner loop of meditation going on. What?
Basically just a slot machine.
It's like a pachinko parlor on your iPad. Okay, maybe. Here's another game called King's Quest, which is an exploration game where you also can enter text and do various things, and you have achievements you have to earn. And this is a hard game that takes a long time to play. And like those Tandy graphics on there. Here's another game from 2006, World of Warcraft, that has just about every element of gameplay and thinking and reasons to want to play it you could possibly think of. If you're a loner, if you're a socializer, you're a dominator, you're an achiever, you're whatever you are, there's something in here for you. At $40 every 3 months. Here's another game, an arcade-style game that's progressed, and it is an aggressive, fun game, but it's evolved. It's not only an action game where you're stealing cars and completing missions, it also, over time, through new versions, develops a narrative. And now playing one of these games is practically like watching a mobster movie, but you're the character in it. And there's a real-time strategy game, Starcraft. Very similar, very competitive people play this. Put on a TV channel in Korea. This will likely be on if you flip through the channels. Very popular there. And as it's progressed, they've added a lot of achievement things you can earn, status, narrative. There's a storyline that goes through this. So a lot of these common threads play through here. Same thing like with multiplayer combat games, first-person shooters. But the video games as a whole have a whole bunch of really awesome things in the toolkit that someone wanting to make a health application can use. Now, you don't have to make a game to use these things. I use these techniques all the time, but I might make them for a surgical simulation or an anesthesia program or a nursing communications simulator of some sort. But the idea is that I understand that having a narrative that the user is part of engages them in the experience. Having achievements and meaningful rewards, being able to explore and with consequences in a way that you learn from them and you can reattempt things. These sorts of things that you can do are things we can use. They're wonderful tools. Yet, everybody says, okay, we have this, and then there's this term gamification, which makes my hair raise a little bit in the back for some reason. Well, we can gamify this now, right? So now you're going to go do this and you're going to earn little coins when you do something like this or that, or you make your little change of shirt on your little character. And it doesn't always work when you try that if it's not a meaningful part of what you're doing. And so I think one problem I see is that putting things and using these game techniques can be great. They can be great. Doesn't mean they always will be. And it's like you have a big hammer and everything starts looking like a nail or a Goomba. But the thing is, the people are different. Think about those games. Does my grandma play Gauntlet 2? Do I play Candy Crush? No, not really. I get annoyed by puzzle games. But my wife likes them. So there's a distribution of people that have different interests in different types of game mechanics and things they respond to. So one thing we need to keep in mind is that you make a game doesn't mean everybody's going to like it. It's going to appeal to a certain slice of the population, although some games can appeal to a wider slice or a narrower slice. Now, Thor may have had a hammer, but he had other tools too. So sometimes we have to look at not everything as being a nail, but some things are other problems we need to address. So let's look at some health games now and look at some of the things that we can do well with health games, in my opinion. First of all, I want to mention some of the barriers. Any game that has a prerequisite, which is a piece of equipment or something you need to do or have, is a barrier to games. Same thing, we're going to discuss motivation, your biologics, game design, as well as feedback and rewards. Anybody know what this game is? Oh yeah, that game actually I think was the first game that actually scared me as a kid. When that guy would come, I'm like, oh my God, oh, and I'd be freaking out. It was great. So this is the Drake equation. The Drake equation is a long-standing equation to look at the probability of intelligent life in the galaxy. And it starts with, okay, how many stars are there? How many of them are like ours? How many of those are likely to have a planet? And how many of those are likely to have an atmosphere? And how many will life evolve? And blah, 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 blah. So you take a huge number and you winnow it down to a very small number. And we're starting to learn some of the inputs on those is actually getting higher, not lower, to determine a probability of life. So if I take my version, I'm going to make an equation for health games. And this is the chances you can get someone to play your game. So you start with the number of people that could potentially benefit from your game. You start with your patient population, okay? So diabetic middle schoolers, okay? And then you say, well, how many of those would be interested in playing the game in the first place? Okay. Times it by the people with the required hardware, okay? So maybe if it's on iPhone and Android, you might have a good chance, but if it runs on a TI 994A or requires 2 Microsoft Kinects plus something else, or requires you to have a needle in your arm with some sort of sensor, you're much less likely. You're going to narrow things down very things. If it requires you to have a HoloLens, well, very few people have a HoloLens, although my kids do. But they're in the extreme minority. And chances of middle schools with diabetics that have a HoloLens development kit right now, there are probably 0 to 1 to 2. If they have any sharing element or multiplayer, you have to schedule that with someone else who also is a middle schooler with diabetes, who might be interested in this game, who has the same hardware or whatever, and they have to be on at the same time. So what's that percentage? And then is the game available? Does it require curation to do the thing or not? And then we get to, is the game any good? Or does the game do, if that's in a genre, is the person likely to enjoy this genre of the game? And would they be willing to replay it? Because none of these experiences are useful once. So are they willing to do it multiple times? Does it keep them? How many apps in the App Store are used more than once? There's metrics on that that's very, very low. Most apps never get launched more than once. Then, what's the chances of the game, even if they play it, what are the chances it actually works and produces the intended health output? Pretty depressing, isn't it? Well, don't be that depressed. These are just things to consider. So, when you look at motivation, that's the next barrier. Does the patient really want to do these things? Do they really want to improve the health in those areas going into it? And so that's an important factor because you don't want to coerce people into it. So I could understand if you're a burn patient and you're going to have these scabs pulled off by the nurse and it's going to hurt a lot, that you might want some sort of pain distraction game and you would be very motivated to want that game to work. Whereas if you have a nutrition game, you see the developer's thinking this is what we're going to get. It's going to be really cool. But often what you got is this. Okay, so if you've got the first one, you're good. If you don't, you've lost before you started the game. Then we go to the biologics. We're intensely driven by our animal desires. So basically anything you can put in you, whether it's an ice cream sundae, whether it's an OxyContin, whether it's a penis. Things that drive biological derivatives towards pleasure. I wouldn't have said that, but I saw some of those games up there, including this. Yeah, so anyway. So biological imperatives are very, very difficult to change. I talk with people all day, well, you got to increase your physical activity. Well, look at me. I love sandwiches, right? So things that are derived physical pleasure are very hardwired to us, and it's very difficult to overcome those things. And if you have a cognitive level that, yes, I'm going to go and work out every day and go do this and improve, but you see that ice cream sandwich and you go, ooh, and your body's telling you this, those are in opposition. That's very difficult to overcome. And I fail at it as a physician most of the time. Occasionally I succeed, I go, yes. But most of the time, as a professional, I fail at this. And so do all the others, they just won't admit it. So if your cognitive and biological orientation towards this are in the same direction, you're much more likely to succeed. Then we get to the game. Does your game, is it good or does it suck? And most games suck. And that's entertainment games. So I encourage developers to copy mechanics of successful games that work. Let me give you an example. In the early 80s, Atari. They were told, some developers, to make a 3D vector Space Invaders. And it didn't quite turn out the way they like, except that people at lunchtime were leaving their desks and they were playing this game called Tempest, which would eventually be called Tempest. And they were playing it, and there was a line to play this game before it ever left to go to the arcades. A very fun game. A lot of elements. It's a visually stimulating, audio stimulating, just wonderful, engaging game. And around the same time, these people put out E.T., which was so bad they had to bury a bunch of the unsold cartridges in the desert. So, because the game sucked. So you have to have, if you're going to use games for health, you need a good game. And there are plenty of models out there of games that are good and work. You need to be aware of that. Then one thing about game design, and one thing that makes the hair on my neck stand up a little bit, is one says, yes, we're going to have an interaction, and it's going to have a lot of these mini games. That is like a little warning chime for me that you don't have a large enough concept of a game to be complete in and of itself. Mini games can work, but I view it as a warning sign, at least when I was spending the government's money. I would go, ooh, mini games. because most of the time they didn't pan out, but I have seen them used effectively. So it's only a warning chime for me. Feedback and rewards. Feedback and rewards are a wonderful thing that games can do. And you should ask yourself, does your game impart a lesson that has a potential to impact the player? Is there emotional impact? Can the player draw a logical conclusion or start questioning things? Can they take those feelings of conclusion and apply them to themselves and transfer that, what their character is doing, to them? I will tell you, this is a game, Valiant Hearts, I have a picture of. It's about World War I. It's sort of a platformer. I have 5 children that are wonderful children. My middle son, Alexander, is autistic. And he plays this game a lot. And I've got to tell you, it's got a great narrative. And at the end, the main character dies. And it's the first time I saw him have empathy for something in a character where he cried for the character. And I'd never seen him do that before. And that was very powerful for me. Also, rewards. If you're giving a rewards, are they desirable? Are the rewards related to the desired behavior outcome? And do they encourage the desired behaviors that you want to see exhibited if you're doing a health game? Now, let's look at some health games that work. These kinds of games tend to be successful. So visualization immersion aids like pain distraction in VR. There's a talk here about Snow World. Post-traumatic stress disorder exposure theory. My colleague Skip Rizzo does at University of Southern California with me. Biofeedback applications, those tend to work. They tend to be egocentric. They're things you want to do and be engaged in. Game-based assessments are successful. Experiential learning, social simulations, physical games, if they're curated, often tend to be successful. So I talked about Snow World. It can decrease pain for painful procedures you're undergoing, significantly better than playing a Nintendo console. Post-traumatic stress disorder, going into a virtual world to gradually increase your exposure to your triggers for PTSD has been shown scientifically to be an outstanding treatment. Game-based assessments. My friends at Blue Marble Games make a lot of neuro games where you're doing things and taking classical neurological tests and putting them in a game environment. Also traumatic brain injury type functionality assessments into a game environment. They do use the mini games, but they're hidden neurological tests. And I think that strategy works very well because we can measure things with computers very objectively. We get really good results from those sorts of games. Experiential learning, you know, where you try things out, you see cause and effect, you build things. You'll see games like that here up on the second floor. Examples of this, Save the Patient has an adverse medical medication reaction. Construct a suspension bridge that is stable. Construct fortifications and assault a well-defended fortress. Or go into a virtual world where they only speak French, ask for directions, find the baker, buy some baguettes and something else, and then navigate your way home. I'd love to see that game. Another experiential living. So here's one by Amplify Games called Cell World, where you go into a sim cell, where you go in and see how things work inside a cell of an animal cell. Or another one where you're learning about ecology through a SimCity sort of analog, where you're building things up. Great ideas. Social simulations. One up here is my institute. We did a avatar you talk to do interview training for autistic young adults to help with their interviewing skills. It actually is not even reactive. It mostly just asks the questions and doesn't understand them, but allows them to rehearse common questions with various types of characters. Huge result, funded by the Dan Marino Foundation. On the lower left is a company, Cognito, that's presenting here, that does all kinds of social simulations in the psychology field that are meaningful interactions where you get to practice these hard conversations, and they're choice-based with multiple characters. I do that as well. I have a standardized patient that you can ask questions, sometimes sensitive ones with a little bit of give and take. And so my research involves these virtual standardized patients and conversational agents. It's really hard, but it is a game because it's a conversational game. Physical games, Blue Marble again is doing, they're a very mixed bag. But they have, if they're curated and used for physical therapy or used for exercise, they can be wonderful. But they don't always reach that level for us. So here's the examples that typically have problems in my experience. Exercise games, literature shows that they often do not result in meaningful long-term changes to behavior. I bought several of them, me. Many exercise games don't even increase heart rate, and some don't target that, but the ones that attempt to, many don't, but some do. Numerous games are very good attempts have been made, but that's nothing compared to nutrition and weight loss games, where it is a much more difficult thing to craft. And I've seen so many lame and naive games. I've seen some good tries, but some of these are you pick the vegetables at the supermarket off your plate kind of games. Addiction games, and the medical compliance games. And remember the addiction, you're thinking about those biologicals with a strong biological enhancements or inducements in them. And so you notice things you eat, things you have to do with your activity, things you put into your body. Those are all things that are the most difficult ones for us to deal with. So here's something I saw at a conference this year that absolutely puzzled me. And I've seen more than one game like this. So here we have an avatar, and you're supposed to flick away the cigarettes. And I saw one, by the way, where you flick away the beer bottles at the bar, except they use a Kinect. So how many people have a Kinect hooked up to a PC, right? And then how many people are going to flick the beer? Like, come on, that's going to do anything? Okay, here's another game. This is a board game, Healthopoly. Give me a break. Oh my God, if you think this is going to change someone's health habits, you're probably smoking some of those addictive substances I told you about earlier. Now, Healthopoly might be a very good game to play if you've got a school health class to learn about health issues and learn information and learn some things and talk about it and be a conversation starter. It could be a very successful game for that. Just don't think they're going to go home and say, Mom, we're going to get that celery, not those Chips Ahoy, Mom, because I played Healthopoly. It's not going to happen. I've seen so many lame nutrition games, I can't tell you. It's like, let's look at the plate, and then, we're going to give them an electric shock up their anus if they don't pick the carrots. It doesn't work. I mean, I've seen so many of these, and the government's funded so many of these. They can be used to learn about nutrition. And actually, I've got one to share with you that one of my colleagues is doing called Houston, We Have Spinach. They just had a successful Kickstarter. And here, I'll play a little bit of the video on it. Here, how do I? They're going to talk about this. So then they go through the normal spiel about all the kids aren't healthy and this and that and the other thing. Actually, I think it's a pretty good idea in that they have different types of nutrients to go on different space missions. It's like a Kerbal space program for nutrition. And it's not saying that this is bad or that's bad, but different nutrients burn a certain way and provide certain types of nutrition. So depending on the length or the distance of the mission you want to do, different combinations of nutrients. I think that's kind of cool because it gets you thinking and has a lot of great game elements, creativity, construction, trial and error, seeing what you're doing. But they also have some mini games in there that do nothing, and they also think this might change what you're likely to eat. I don't know if they'll succeed with that. But I actually think this is a good approach. I just don't know if it's the whole picture. So I would say the Kerbal thing's cool. It has potential to cheat, but I don't like that there's mini games in it, and I'm not sure it'll go all the way. There's a Superpowers Legion that you can view up here. They did something interesting. It's a lot of mini games I'm skeptical of, but what they did do is they have a token economy system with children where they earn points from their parents or the teachers for good behaviors they do in the real world, and then it powers up their characters on this game platform so they can actually perform better. The games are rated very difficult with the initial set of capabilities. And then as they level up, they can actually beat the games, and they've had some good research results with it. I think that's a creative solution. I don't know if it's due to the games or if it's due to the token economy system and all the attention from the teachers and the parents about the positive behaviors, though. I think that one is difficult to tell, but I applaud those great folks in Brazil for doing that. Now, here's a really interesting one. I get a lot of people, let's put a proposal into the NIH to make a phone-based avatar to help with their compliance for diabetes. That would be a good one. I've seen stuff like this a lot. It crashes and burns all the time. There might be a good way to do it, but I haven't seen it yet. Now, Bear did something very brave and wonderful and a little scary. They produced a video game a few years ago that actually makes you bleed. Literally. They took a Nintendo DS game console and put a glucometer that you plug into it. And the idea was to increase your sugar checking compliance by allowing you rewards within a game. And it actually is a wonderful idea. It failed. I think it failed for a couple of reasons, but one reason is there's only one game. The game you could play was lame, and that the rewards were things like you can get different outfits for your characters, and they weren't things that were meaningful. Like the Superpowers Legion people made the game really hard and gave you plus-ups that actually changed the gameplay. Whereas these people just did decorational things, and I think that's where their failure was. But actually, diabetes patients and children, they're famously non-compliant. And so I applaud them for trying this, and I hope someone tries something in this area again. It was a very brave thing to do, and I think it was wonderful even though it failed. Exergames. Exergames are cool. I thought that the Nintendo Wii was going to change things. I thought the Kinect on Xbox was going to change things. I bought some of the games. It hadn't worked out. People don't stick with them for some reason. And that's a problem. And most of the games don't increase heart rate, which is something we like to see. You have these Fitbit-like devices. I have a band here. People most of the time don't wear these more than 90 days. I actually like mine. It gets me stuck. I'm actually doing more activity, but it's mostly walking with it. I've done 3,800 steps only today. Yeah, and then people cheat them and do those things or other things, which doesn't make sense. But there are games on these platforms. And so there are people that you can do things to play games with other players on this. The problem is do you have the same device? Do you have the same brand operating system? Are you on the same platform? And can you find someone on there? So it's kind of the finding people to make it meaningful problem. But there is some work there. One game I had developed with the Carnegie Mellon Entertainment Technology Center was called Cardioactive, and it was an experiment. Now, it fails in that it requires a lot of specialized equipment. So no one's going to be able to play this game, even though we have the code, because it requires two those Wii fitness boards. It has heart rate monitors, and it has Kinect. But the idea was to create a fun experience that would increase, and the game would react to the player heart rate, and the game couldn't suck. And I gave the inspiration after a classic arcade called Wizard of War, W-O-R, that had great music and a lot of tension. And so they created this game called Webs of War. Don't know what's happening with the videos here. So we'll get into the business here. They made, Carnegie Mellon students made all the music. And so the game reacts to your motions. You have to fend away the spiders, but you have to duck and raise, and and the more higher your heart rate is from your baseline, the more power your shots will have. I think they might have a shot of me playing it here. So it was a fun experience for a short period of time. Now here's a bad health game, because you got this kid on this thing. It only works for a short period of time. What's the chances if you get this, you're going to change the TV source to actually play the games on there that are probably kind of thin? But let me show you a successful one. This is probably the most successful health game I know of. You find these in gym clubs everywhere. No one ever talks about it. You're going to spend a half hour on that gym bike, or 20 minutes or 40 minutes, And the fact that they started putting a little immersive world, a virtual world, and you see the other people, and you can do races, and you can explore, and do all those things you want to do in there, even without an account. Or you can have a consistent thing and learn achievements. That's a super successful health game. But it was done the opposite way. It wasn't a game trying to pull the exercise. It was the exercise adding the game. And that was a super successful formula. But the extra games at work have these sorts of things. And I wanted to show you some games that are known to work, have social interaction, are scientifically efficacious, and have excellent game design. Here's one. Here's another. Here's another. Here's another. Here's some with girls. Yay, girls. And I've got to tell you that the truth is exercise games are cool, but we could probably improve health more in this country if we changed our zoning regulations of how we zone property, because we can't walk anywhere in our suburbia world. And if we added 90 minutes of sports, rigorous sports, to the school curricula every day, would probably have a greater effect than anything we could do with these games. I like exercise games, but initiating the use and getting people to continue with them hasn't quite been figured out successfully in the long term. But I would also iterate that games are great neuroscience tools for measurement, and that health games can work. But if you're thinking about going into health games, use your common sense, like step back and say, how would this really work? When someone says, I've got a great idea. And think things through, and think through that kind of chain of the availability of the game, the quality of the game, and the impact a game could really have. You've got to think that through. But one of the other things I want to leave you with is I think something really cool is going to happen. And that's with mixed reality. And when mixed reality becomes more portable, I think new possibilities are going to come out for this. For example, imagine when you're running on a track, having a virtual person to run with you and pace you, or run ahead, or having some games. What I would like to see, because I like riding a bicycle, is I would like to see, like, my street, without obstructing real cars or anything, have dots on it, and have, like, this Pac-Man guys chasing me down the blocks, and actually having to make, like, a Pac-Man game out of my city grid. I would like to see stuff like that. And I think kids' sports can be amazing, and other things. We could take video games, bring them into the real world, because sitting on in front of a little console, there's only so much you can do. But physical activity is a real world thing. So if we can bring the games and bring these techniques into the real world, I think there's an amazing future for particularly exer games. It's just that we just don't quite have it yet. We're not quite there, but it's coming. So, so I think we've reviewed some health games from different types of genres, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if anybody has questions about it, feel free to reach me at this email address or talk with me later at the conference. Thank you very much.